And what we're going to do now is move into another panel conversation. Making their way up here are a few guests. So we have Suha Fayyaz, who is the head of People, Operations and Systems at HelloFresh, Steve Greenberg with CBS, and Janet Rodas with Aurora Cannabis. So please welcome them.
Thank you. Sit here. Let's let you sit in the center.
Okay.
How are we doing?
Great.
All right. It's good to see you all in 3 dimensions. We had many prep sessions, and they're all on Zoom, so it's a reward to see everyone in 3 dimensions in real life. So our topic here is streamlining your talent acquisition and onboarding process. So Suha, Janet, Steve, as we were prepping for this, we went through a couple categories. We landed on a few categories: data and technology, budgeting and investments, candidate experience, and what's the last one, everyone? Last category? AI. Where have you been? Come on. So we'll touch on a couple different aspects of how we streamline talent acquisition and improve the onboarding process. And Suha, maybe I could start with you. Just basic data and technology, leveraging that to improve onboarding, see efficiencies in the talent acquisition process or processes that we have in talent acquisition. Just maybe talk to us a little bit at a basic level about what data products and processes you've implemented to see some of those gains.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone can hear me okay? All right, thank you, Ian. So I do truly believe that the heart of an efficient onboarding and talent acquisition process, it lies data-driven decision-making as well as the strategic use of technology. So I'm a true believer in technology. If you have technology, use it. Make sure that the administrative processes are reduced, and it helps us in concentrating on more strategic elements. In the companies that I have worked with, and I'm sure that's the case with everyone, but talent acquisition and onboarding processes, they do go hand in hand with each other. So if the transition is not seamless when it goes from talent acquisition to onboarding, it can lead to retention risk, it can lead to lack of productivity. So a few things, I'll talk about my experience. What we have done in terms of talent acquisition efficiencies and onboarding is, let me say top 3 things, or I can go on and on. Okay, the first thing what we have done is optimization of our HRIS system. So what we use is Workday, and once the hiring is done, so the transition to onboarding is pretty seamless, and we get the pre-boarding tasks automated and the triggers are sent to the new joiners. So this Workday optimization really helps us in setting up the right experience before the employees have already joined, and it ensures consistency. Another thing that we do at HelloFresh is that we really believe in kind of self-management and knowledge management. So we have designed platforms such as an intranet, we like to call it the wiki, which has policies and procedures, HR contacts, anything that the new joiner needs to get started and set them up for success. So that's easily accessible for our new joiners. Another thing, then the last thing that we have done is that we, as I said, data-driven decision-making is very important. So we try to look at what are the key milestones in a new joiner's journey. So that's day 1, week 1, the first 30 days, and then the first year stay survey. So we like to send out these surveys, look at the data points, how are the new joiners feeling, what are the things that we can improve, and really take this data back to the leaders and try and improve our onboarding and talent acquisition strategies. So, yeah.
So there's a lot in there, and I want to ask you a follow-up, and maybe we can, I'd like to hear from Steve and Janet as well, but in all that you're doing now, you didn't start doing all of that. No. Probably you walked your way into some things. Absolutely. You accidentally maybe stumbled upon others that were missing. Talk to us about what that journey looked like based on how your org and HelloFresh has evolved?
Absolutely. So everything that I said, it's a journey of a year to 2 years. So the first thing that we wanted to look at was our numbers, is the candidate conversion rate. So this candidate conversion rate, we were hearing a lot that, we really need to look into our onboarding efforts. It was inconsistent throughout like different offices that we have for HelloFresh, for example. So the first thing that we wanted to bring in was consistency. So first of all, we didn't have like a system at that point in time. So we brought in consistency by centralizing that onboarding process. So we make sure that if a candidate gets hired in Toronto versus a candidate that gets hired in Vancouver, they're getting the same experience. So that really speaks about the employer branding. Then over a few period of time, we brought in an HRIS system, which could actually automate those triggers for onboarding, send them the documents that they need to upload. And then when that started working, and then we're like, okay, onboarding is working, we're setting up the new joiners. Now, it's always that you're never perfect, right? So you always need to improve. So how do we get the data? Let's start some surveys. So we picked up day one because our onboarding is a one-day onboarding, but then we picked another survey that goes out in the first week, because of day one, usually everyone's pretty excited. But by end of week one, they start, like, their true feelings start coming out, right? So their answers might differentiate. So we had like a day one and a week one survey. As per the data that we had seen in our turnover, we saw a lot of people were leaving the organization at a 1 year mark. So we wanted to make sure, like, what's happening in that 12-month mark that people have decided to leave. So we did a 1 year stay survey that made us like look into a few things that, for example, like a few things that came up is that they wanted more transparency or time with the leadership. So we introduced a few sessions around that. So definitely, it's a change management journey that has been going on, and we're still not perfect, but I feel like we're looking at these data points every day and trying to improve.
And maybe, Janet, I can jump over to you. How has the talent acquisition kind of tools, technology journey shaped up at Aurora? How have you chosen where to place your bets, where to spend your budget? Not an easy choice.
It isn't. And I think just by way of context, because I always like to make sure the audience has a little bit of a sense of some of our organizations and how we are comprised. So Aurora Cannabis is a global licensed medical producer of medical cannabis. And we've got operations in Canada, Europe, and Australia. So we've got roughly about 1,100 employees. So not scale and size as you would see in enterprise organizations, but the complexity that's tied to being across multiple continents across the globe is definitely there. And the approach when I walked in to the organization roughly about 3 years ago was really grateful to be able to walk in and have an integrated ATS system that had our candidate experience from an external and internal perspective really linked to our onboarding, which was fantastic. So we were able to really see key inputs throughout the candidate journey, and that's really important to make sure we have that insight, because when you drill down on some of that data, you'll be able to start to understand a little bit more around, are you taking too long to kind of engage your candidates? Are you, seeing some lag time in terms of offer acceptance? And I'll use one particular use case where I think within the last 6 months, we've seen that offer acceptance be extended because it is a little bit of a challenging market. Candidates are really kind of, pushing back and really negotiating around what that total comp package is. So it's really having our bets set up in one integrated system. And I know a lot of people here may not have one system, but really starting to think about what are those key inputs and those key areas that you can start to pull some insight to really navigate and tell that story. From there, we're really trying to look at where do we make those investments, and we're using a milestone approach. So when we close an acquisition, it's an opportunity for us to be able to take a step back and say, okay, are we still happy with what we are using in terms of tools? Do we need to make some decisions or put some proposals, some business casing together to really understand, do we need to make some investments in certain areas where it's going to really help us, whether it's regionally, or it's specific to one of our particular business units. So I really encourage a lot of us to really take that step back when your businesses are going through some transformational change, some M&A transactions, an opportunity to really look at your integration as those opportunities to really think about your tool set and really start to build those business casing to start to say, maybe we want to make a necessary change. How do we want to invest to be able to kind of integrate as well? So we're really thinking about it holistically, but also intentionally when it makes sense for us to make those right moves. And I think for our acquisition in Australia last year, that was really important. We made a conscious decision to kind of look at what could we do, and the decision was effectively continue on with the tool set that we've got, be able to integrate our teams in Australia and have, again, economies of scale to be able to kind of look at the business value creation at the end of the day.
You hit on the candidate experience, which I want to dive into, Steve, with you in a minute. But before we do, when you consider the case making and kind of putting the case forward to place a bet and allocate your budget, are you doing that from the lens of something's broken, or we can get ahead of something and anticipate needs and get ahead of a problem before it becomes a problem, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a nice balance of both.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be coming from a place of partnership, and I really, speak truth to power around partnership. The partnership that we have with our IT partners is really critical for us to be able to sit down on an annual basis and really say, okay, what are our goals and objectives? And I say IT partners, it's our internal IT teams, where we want to talk to them about what our functional goals are, what does that look like, and what resourcing and dollars do we need to start thinking about to be able to kind of accomplish that. And it's also a partnership as well with our finance teams to really start to really get them to see that we need to do some critical elements around fixing, but we also need to make some investments because we are anticipating some growth, and what does that look like? So it's a nice balance between the two for sure.
Yeah, the cases I've seen, they often fall into one category or the other, or they have blends of both, but whether you're an enormous organization or an organization that's kind of early in its journey, there isn't an org that I know of that doesn't care about finding the right people and getting them and landing them at the right price point at the right time. And so sometimes you see parts of that process that are broken and need repair. It's kind of repair versus value. And I go there because, Steve, that shows up in the candidate experience, right? When an organization has maybe a disjointed set of processes or something that's seamless. What's been your view in the market of how candidate expectations and the candidate experience is sort of evolving?
Well, first, thank you, Ian. I was starting to think you just wanted me here to be a pretty face in the middle of this panel.
Best for last, best for last.
I'm on CBS Radio. I'm not wanted for my pretty face, for sure. But anyway, it's great to be here. This is really a great, it's been a great day. I'll answer that in a second. I've sat in on not every session, but most, and I really love this panel because most of the other sessions have started off with a dramatic statement about the issues and the problems that you're all facing, that we're all facing with retention and recruitment and this scary giant blizzard coming at us that we're calling AI. And I think it's really important before any of you start thinking about how to address that problem to get a really clear understanding as to what your problem actually is, right? Because it's like when you have AI is like steroids, right? The promise is, what you're being sold is AI is going to put your company on steroids. Well, if you have pneumonia, steroids makes you a lot sicker, right? So you have to, are you going to make things that are not working in your company even worse by bringing AI into it? And so the way you get out of that box, I think, it's so important. I'm just going to put a vote in here for a different AI, an actual intelligence. So and respect actual intelligence. Respect the forensics that you can create on your own for how are you hiring people? Where did your last 20 hires come from? Where have your best 20 hires come from? Where are the 20 people who have been at your company the longest? How did you find them? Why are they still there? What do they like about the company? What did their resumes look like when you hired them? Would AI have even granted these people an interview? You know, as it turns out. At Pfizer, I did this kind of thing to myself all the time. And we had this tool that would rate resumes, A, B, C, and D. Perhaps some of you have used this. And I would pride myself on hiring Ds. I was like, okay, you graded them a D, but there's a lot here that's not on the resume probably. And so I would just suggest to all of you to start with your actual intelligence. What works in what's good in your company before you address fixing problems. It's like the scene from Apollo 13. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie. I love that movie. It's when the ship gets hit and all heck is breaking loose and everyone's trying to figure out what to do, and then the head of the mission goes, hold on. Let's start with what's good on the ship. What do we have that's good? And then we'll fix what's wrong with what's good. And I feel like that's probably maybe a good way of approaching whatever you think are your problems in your HR departments.
Yeah. Suha, let me go back to you on the candidate experience. What's been your impression of how maybe the candidate experience, but also the interaction between recruiters and candidates looks like at HelloFresh? What does that look like for you?
Absolutely. I feel like over time it is kind of evolving. Initially, like a lot of companies are using, like AI generated ATS, like applicant tracking system and all. But I feel the human interaction is still very, very important. So at HelloFresh, we've not yet explored the AI system, so we're not doing that. But what we really try and do is that the talent acquisition team is kind of acting as advisors and relationship builders as well, because now they're just moving away from more administrative processes because we have sourcers for that. So, interviews can be scheduled, that can all be done. But the talent acquisition team and that relationship with the candidate is more about, employer branding and making sure, they concentrate on DEI efforts. So that's what we'd really try and keep that human interaction a lot. So not a lot through always relying on emails and like automated emails saying that you're accepted, you're rejected, anything. We always try and get that human interaction. So just as an example, if a candidate is not successful and they've had passed through a few series of interviews, we make sure that that talent acquisition person has a call with them face to face, and then explain them and give them feedback. Similarly, when a candidate is accepted, we always try and have again a human connection and talk to them you've been offered, and we look at that reaction face to face, and it's just so we have received such great feedback that we don't want to change it. So keeping that human interaction alive is super important.
Does it depend a bit on the talent segments that you're looking for? And I'm thinking about some of the stereotypes out there about younger generations leaning into AI, older generations leaning away from it. Janet, do you see anything along those lines at Aurora?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've started to kind of think about a little bit more intentionally is how do we create personas for different types of candidates as we are looking to kind of actively recruit or source for them. Yeah. And I say that because, a persona may want to be interacted with in a very different way, and that's where maybe the AI can kind of come in. So in a high volume operations environment where you're hiring for quite a bit, a click or a text to apply is probably going to make sense to solve for bringing in talent in that respect. Whether it's a more specialized, maybe corporate-facing role where the human interaction and the ability to kind of sell an organization on the value proposition is going to require, a little bit more, and that's where the human intervention is going to be really important. So I think for us, it's really, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's really trying to, just how we segment our patient and our customer data, how do we segment a little bit of the data so we can create an experience for the right type of candidate, for the right type of role, right. And starting to really think intentionally around, okay, this group may need a different type of interaction, and then that's where you kind of layer in the AI a little bit to say, okay, this might be a solution for this particular group or persona as well.
And it also works for the employer. by making a more interactive kind of recruitment process, you can learn a lot about the candidate by how they interact with you in those early stages. And again, that might not be relevant for if you're hiring for a designer for a toy company. It may not matter how quickly they respond, but if you're hiring for an EA, right, to work with your CEO, and they're telling you they're always available and they never have typos and they respond immediately, but then it takes them 4 days to respond to you when you say you have an interview. That's useful. That's not just the candidate experience, right? That's learning about, obviously, the candidate and helping you make a better decision.
For sure, for sure. I just want to see a show of hands. Who has in their org an AI or machine learning kind of front-end screening mechanism for candidates as applications come in? Who's using AI on the front end?
Just one. Wow.
Wow.
Wow,
That's
not
amazing.
too many at all.
I almost feel like the legislation is scaring us a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll fully qualify. As an organization, we use success factors as kind of our ATS, and we've got a lot of modules within success factors lit up. I think for us, we've taken a very radical approach in terms of not going there yet, but still leveraging, being a Microsoft shop, some piloted groups around Copilot, and how specifically I find, talent acquisition is at the front seat to be able to optimize some of the inefficiencies. So really looking at kind of job descriptions, a lot of the admin that's behind that, and really streamlining that to be able to start to execute on having those conversations with candidates, being able to really engage in a more impactful way where it's going to matter the most.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see in my work as well, orgs it's an org by org approach. The legislation, for that matter, too, in the U.S. is state by state. There's no overarching nationwide kind of viewpoint in the United States on automated decision-making tools in the candidate process, and the same for Canada, right? I mean, province by province. There's a bill that's, I think, under consideration, but a countrywide piece of legislation that's governing AI, like they have in Europe, is not yet in place. So I think legislation's always the last to catch up to companies that are like leaning in and experimenting and innovating with some of these startups. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Maybe since we're on the AI topic, we can whiteboard and riff a little bit here, but the hot take on AI, like where is this going? Like, do you see fad? Do you see hype? Do you see like some promising green shoots that you might be excited to lean into? Like, Suha, maybe you can start off.
I know AI is like the hot topic. It definitely is a game changer, but I believe it's not the silver bullet, right? So AI does bring in the efficiencies, but then again, there are, we talked about it, like biases, and there could be like compliance risks to it. I feel like it's very important to strike the right balance, because AI or technology, it brings in the efficiency, but the impact still remains through human interaction and implementation. So striking that right balance is important, and I feel like the organizations, we're still trying to figure it out. We're not able to strike that right balance, might fall off on one of the sides, right? Because truly AI, technology, everything is here to not to speed up human decision making, it's here to support and augment that decision making. So it's just that the organizations are still trying to understand that, and honestly, the organizations that I've worked with, and including HelloFresh, we're still trying to understand the risks around it. So yeah. Still figuring it out.
Yeah, we hear often about the phrase humans in the loop. Has anyone had an AI conversation that hasn't included humans in the loop? It's a friend of mine, Amit Mahindra, he's the former head of people analytics at Apple. He wrote an article recently and talked about who are these humans that are in the loop. And Steve, it makes me think about your actual intelligence comment. So we undoubtedly need humans in the loop, but to kind of work with AI, how do you see that playing out as a maybe a kind of a partnership of sorts, but tell me.
You know, I'm a history buff, so I love what was. I'm not so big on what will be. I don't really know. But I would just say that it seems pretty clear we're pretty early on in the trajectory of AI, and I think you're very wise in your approach to be cautious in how you utilize it. You can't ignore it. We should start all becoming more adept at understanding it and what the risks and benefits potentially are. But one thing we know for sure, right? If we're sitting here a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what we're talking about now is going to seem really outdated, and the case studies are going to be much different, and the whole feel is going to be much different. But the fact that you're all here and taking the time to learn about it and think about it and care about it, to me means you should be ahead of the curve on these changes as they occur. So good for all of you.
Yeah. Janet, what's your unplugged opinion on AI?
I think, we heard from Esther and Javier about, the importance of governance, and for organizations to be taking time to intentionally talk about how they want to distribute data, share data, who's going to have ownership and accountability, tells me that it's here to stay. I think a lot of organizations are treading quite carefully, including ourselves at Aurora. We see ourselves as having some proprietary information, so we're not really fully diving in head first on it. We're treading very cautiously, like I've seen with a number of my peers externally in the market, in pharma, in areas where you want to protect your most critical assets, and sometimes that could be products, it could be intellectual property. So I think it's here to stay, but it shows that there is quite a bit of commitment from great organizations that are thinking about how to do it well and with intention. And I think it's incumbent on us to think about and think outside of the box for those use cases that make sense, that really take away the time and the heaviness from our teams and open our teams up to be able to work on the more empowering, the strategic, the more rewarding work that's going to really bring that extra value to the organization.
Well said, well said. One more question, and then we might be able to take a few from the audience. And we didn't prepare for this, but I think it'll be fine. When I think about, the learnings that I've had in my work and the advice I might have given myself maybe 3 or 5 years ago when starting perhaps down the path of optimizing efficiencies for talent acquisition. You all have described a journey of sorts over the last half an hour or so. So when you think about, Suha, when you think about orgs that might be starting out, what are some of the learnings or maybe the advice you'd give to do it the right way, landmines to avoid, safety tips? What would you say to orgs that are starting out on the journey?
My true advice is in the experience that I've had is that it's okay to take risks. So sometimes you might learn about something and instead of spending too much time, now that might be a different opinion from others, but I believe do your research, know your numbers, have your examples, have the historical implementations of a certain, maybe a software that you're trying to implement, but it's okay to take risks. Sometimes you don't need to wait till you hear its success. Try it out, test it out, and that's I've always worked in tech sector, and we try and do things fast, the sprints. So try and do it. If it fails, it's okay. You learn from it. So yeah, that's my top advice. It's okay.
Excellent.
Sometimes, yeah.
Steve, what would you say?
That's a great question, and it requires probably a longer and more thoughtful answer that I can ever give. But I would say a couple of things. One is to definitely treat all your candidates with respect, especially these days. They're not just you should anyway, obviously, in and of itself. It's important. But candidates talk to one another now. There's all kind of vehicles online. If people have a bad experience, they will write on Reddit about you, and you will, and it hurts. And so good manners now are mandatory, I think. Also, I would try to create processes in recruitment that do relate to the job that you're actually looking to fill. Don't have the same recruitment process for every type of job. It really doesn't make any sense. As I said earlier, if you're interviewing for a toy, a designer versus it should be two different recruitments. It takes more work, but you can end up with much better results. One of the final thing is, look, people's resumes are just a start. Obviously, we all know this, but I don't know how many of us actually have the time to act on this. But I worked for the founder of a toy company. He was remarkable. at finding skills that candidates hinted at but didn't actually use in their job, and he would bring them in. They would think they'd be getting an offer to be a salesperson, and they would be the head of supply chain, and they'd be the greatest supply chain person you could ever imagine. And that's really where we can add value, right, as HR people. Anybody can look at an obvious resume, and say, let's give this person an interview. But finding the diamonds in the rough, the people who have, the unexplored talent out there, and it's really, really fun and rewarding too. So,
Great. Janet?
In 10 seconds, I would probably say,
sorry.
20 seconds.
Take 30.
Take 30, okay. I see, the medical cannabis industry as still very much in its infancy. And we operate very much in startup mode. So I can completely resonate with what Suha said in terms of, really fail fast. I think for us, our mindset, and I'm really grateful that we've had this type of approach, is really pilot.
Right.
And I can't emphasize that enough, because it gives you an opportunity to test out those hypotheses, to test out those use cases, and be able to be in a position to have really informative data that you can then build out your business case to make those commitments for the longer term as well.
Yeah, well said. And it makes me think that the advice that I would give is, we organize HR teams into these boxes. Talent acquisition has a number of processes and systems that are used, and that's a good thing. And sometimes it creates walls. And talent acquisition data flows right into comp data, and that flows right into learn. So we need to look kind of over the wall when we're thinking about systems and data and how to improve the candidate experience, who frankly doesn't care about your org chart. They care about being communicated to with respect and anticipating their needs. And I think from what we heard from our three panelists today, if we do the things that they suggested, we'll have a good shot at that. So let's give them a round of applause.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. I think we're a little kind of funky on time, but why don't we ask if there's a question out there that's burning?
It says no time for questions.
We have no time for questions, so a round of applause again.
There's a screen in front of us, so yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Thank
Okay,
you so much.
thanks, Lottie. That was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.